find some interesting visuals coming in, but then, of course, there are a lot of action, what we see from the global markets also. 15-month war is coming to an end. Actually, let's get you the entire story. Israel and Hamas have finally reached a landmark, that this morning it's an optimistic story. They've reached a landmark agreement to cease hostilities in Gaza and exchange Israeli hostages for Palestinian prisoners. This breakthrough comes after months of intense negotiations, which was facilitated by Egyptian as well as Qatari mediators with the support of the United States. The deal is particularly significant given its timing just ahead of the January 20th inauguration of US President-elect Donald Trump. Now, the conflict between Israel and Hamas has been devastating, with Israeli troops invading Gaza after Hamas-led gunmen breached security barriers, killing 1,200 soldiers and even civilians, and abducting over 250 hostages. Now, on humanitarian toll has been staggering, with more than 46,000 people killed so far, hundreds of thousands displaced, struggling to survive in makeshift shelters. The agreement is seen as a crucial step towards ending the 15-month war that has ravaged the Middle East. President-elect Trump has been vocal about his desire for a swift resolution, warning of severe consequences if the hostages were not released. His Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, worked closely with President Joe Biden's team to facilitate the deal. The deal marks a significant shift now in the dynamics of the conflict, coming after Israel's successful assassinations of top Hamas and Hezbollah leaders. As the region awaits the implementation of the agreement, hopes are high that his breakthrough will pave the way for a lasting peace. Let's go across and listen in what Joe Biden had to say on this.
Because at long last, I can announce a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached between Israel and Hamas. For more than 15 months of conflict that began with Hezbollah's brutal massacre on October the 7th, more than 15 months of terror for the hostages, their families, the Israeli people, more than 15 months of suffering by the innocent people of Gaza. Fighting in Gaza will stop, and soon the hostages will return home to their families. The elements of this deal were what I laid out in detail this past May, which was embraced by countries around the world and endorsed overwhelmingly by the UN Security Council. The deal is structured in 3 phases. Phase 1 will last 6 weeks. It includes a full and complete ceasefire, withdrawal of Israeli forces from all the populated areas of Gaza, and the release of a number of hostages held by Hamas, including women and elderly and the wounded.
All right, then all eyes are definitely going to be on that Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal as well. But on to the biggest talking point for market participants this morning, then the December consumer price index that witnessed a seasonally adjusted 0.4% rise coming in, putting the 12-month inflation rate at 2.9%. Now, the street was estimating just respective readings of 0.3% and 2.9%. Then, excluding food and energy, the core CPI annual rate was 3.2%, a notch down from the month before, and slightly better when you compare it with the 3.3% forecast as well. Now, the core measure rose 0.2% on a monthly basis, and also 1.1 percentage point less than expected. Now, much of the move higher in the CPI came from a 2.6% gain in energy prices for the month, pushed higher by a 4.4% surge in gasoline. That was also responsible for 40% of the index's gain. Now, the data, of course, pointing to an inflation trend that lines up with the Federal Reserve's view for a slower path of rate cuts this year. Let's also keep it going with some commentary then. How is the latest inflation print likely to impact Fed's rate cut stance? Can investors then expect the Fed to hit pause on rate cuts? And additionally, how can we expect global and emerging markets to then perform in the medium term? Let's also go across and listen into the view coming in from markets commentator Geoff Dennis, who gave us his opinion about the same. Listen into what he then had to say.
Inflation is indeed stabilizing, but it's stabilizing above the Fed's target of 2%, stabilizing around 3%. And so I don't think anything we've had here in the CPI report makes it any easier for the Fed to consider rate cuts at the moment. And the most recent dot plot from December is 2 interest rate cuts in 2025. And when I wrote my own outlook for emerging markets in 2025 about a week ago, I talked about 2 rate cuts in 2025 also. I think to get to 2 rate cuts this year will be very difficult. I think the call has got to be now somewhere between 0 and 2, and I would not be at all surprised if the Fed decides to keep rates on hold all year, unless that is the economy slows dramatically, which at the moment it doesn't look as if it's going to do.
All right, so moving on, the optimism that got fueled into U.S. market was partly because of the CPI and also on the back of the strong earnings which are being reported by the banks so far. Many of the banks which reported earnings have beaten the estimates, posting higher profits. For example, JP Morgan's profit is up by 50% to $14 billion, and net interest income that came in around $94 billion. Wells Fargo net interest income is at $11.84 billion versus estimate of $11.7 billion. Meanwhile, Citigroup's revenue also reported higher, $1.24 billion versus the estimate of $1.51 billion. So earnings is also what is keeping with the pace.
Alright, then moving on, shifting focus then to TikTok. TikTok is preparing to potentially make the app unavailable to its 170 million American users on Sunday, the same day a US ban is set to go into effect. Now, a law signed by US President Joe Biden in April requires TikTok to divest from its Chinese ownership and sell to a US company, or it will be shut down if the Supreme Court declares the law unconstitutional. Before then, TikTok can continue to exist as it is today. According to reports, President-elect Donald Trump, whose term begins a day after a ban would start, is considering issuing an executive order to suspend enforcement of a shutdown for 60 to 90 days. So the clock is definitely ticking for TikTok.
Moving on, what comes across as a shocking news is that Hindenburg research. Nate Anderson, the man who made his name with campaigns targeting billionaires like Gautam Adani, Jock Dorsey, and even Carl Icahn, said he's disbanding his small but renowned firm. Anderson cited the toll of the rather intense and at times all-encompassing nature of the work as the reason for his decision in a website post published on Wednesday.
Alright, and that was your daily dose of news and updates, at least on the global front.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.